We are live. Keith, how are you, my man?
Absolutely fantastic. Today is the best day of my life. How you doing?
I love it, man. I got to match that energy. Today is the best day of my life, too. And hopefully, for everyone who is going to tune into this live or uh, in the recording after, hopefully, it's the best day for you, too. And this is our first time live streaming an episode. So do bear with us with any technical difficulties. But this one's going to be a good one. We're going to go through, as the title would suggest, why you always feel broke no matter how hard you work. And it's not some arbitrary thing that you're feeling. It's a set of systems and steps that brought us to the point where we are today. And so what we're going to do is try to walk through those things, explain some concepts that you may have heard before, you may not have, but once you hear Keith and I go through it, I think it'll make the situation of things make a lot more sense.
Absolutely. Yep.
100%. All right, so where should we start, man?
I think um, one of the first things to talk about is probably the central bank.
Mhm.
And I'm going to start this off from the US perspective and specifically because it's what
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know most
Eh,
about.
Honestly, you guys, your economy pushes the world, so that makes sense.
It's so funny because like I've had so many people reach out to me and say, "Dude, you're only focusing on the US economy." And I'm like,
Like, you're
"Dude,
American.
like, yeah, I'm American." And also, like, I did some of the data on it. I don't have it on the top, but it's like 60% of the global stock market is just the United States alone, something like that.
Numbers that big.
So it's, yeah, it's like, and maybe I'm
Wow.
wrong. You can check me on that. Check me on that if you can.
Yeah, and also anybody who's watching this, whenever we make a mistake, just please correct us in the comments. We're happy to hear the specifics. Like we're talking for hours here. We're gonna get numbers and figures inaccurate. That's the way it goes. But yeah, no. In terms of focusing on America, there's a reason to do that, right? Like that just makes sense. There's a reason why I may be in Canada, but I don't talk about the Canadian economy because no one really cares. Like we don't really have much say in the global influence of things. So it is what it is. Did you find that number?
I think I see 20 as of late 2024, early 2025, the US market accounted for nearly 50% of the total global equity value. The
Yeah.
next largest markets, China and the European Union, are each well under 15%.
Wow. I didn't know the numbers were that different.
So hopefully
And
you
that's
guys understand where we're coming from.
yeah, and that's also a really great place to start because when someone hears that, right? The value, that value is a concept. Like right? It's not really backed to anything. It's value that the market says something is worth, right? Where that's kind of a fugazi, right? That's not really a real thing. So pick up where you just were.
Yeah. So, all right. So, in the United States specifically, in 1913, we had our first, not our first, actually, this was, I believe, the second or third attempt of a central bank. So, there had been several attempts before this, but they didn't necessarily work very well. And the reason that we had this central bank come about in 1913 was essentially because we had major bank failures over and over again throughout the 1800s. And these bank failures would not just be bank failures, but they would lead to complete economic downturns where the entire economy would slow down or even stop to a halt because banking systems failed. People didn't have proper ways to transact with one another. And this kind of was because essentially before the central bank, you had different banks would have their own banknotes. They kind of had their own money. And so it also made it a lot harder for if you were in one place to like go somewhere else and still do trade with someone, even if you were still in the same country, even in the same
Mhm.
state, you know. So
Made it nearly impossible.
say that.
It made it really difficult to transact.
Yeah, dude. It's like it's almost, impossible to properly do it. There's like some level of like trust that has to be also in that. If you're gonna give me this other bank's banknote, am I first off, am I gonna have to go over there and like, convert and get my money back or whatever and stuff like that. So anyways, 1913, the central bank had a few different things that they were trying to solve. First was to kind of unify the entire money system. Secondly, also to provide a backstop to all of these, essentially what would happen with bank runs, right? So they needed to
Mhm.
have essential authority that could be the lender of last resort. Okay. So that was essentially the major idea of it. And it only kind of came later around what the real mandates of the central bank were, which we know now are like the 2% inflation target and then also the maximum employment kind of mandate. But that wasn't something that I think was initially in place. There's a whole like story about like the actual origins of all of this. And at the time, you know, the Federal Reserve, right, is a private institution. Technically, it's like owned by the member banks, right? So like Chase, Wells Fargo, like these banks technically are the owners of the Fed.
Mhm.
Now, this continued to kind of get disintermediated and changed around how that really worked over time. I'm not an expert in all that, but um, initially it was much more direct that like these banks actually owned the central bank. So, anyways, that was kind of the beginnings of like looking at having just a unified monetary system in the United States, period. So that was a good place to start. Anything you want to tap on about that?
Yeah, so when you say all these things, right, like, a lot of these terms are probably things that people have never really heard of, so I think we should probably break down them more in particular, like what these things mean. But for where I want to go is to the psychology part of it, and try to tell a little bit of history where I can. And I'm going to butcher the specifics, but where we are today, where we see money, right? A lot of people, we've just become accustomed to seeing a dollar bill and equating that to value, but that's a fairly recent concept, right? And so if you go back far enough, when people were transacting, that used to be based on gold, right? But then gold was not possible to really bring places easily, especially when these people were traveling across very long distances on boats and different things. And so that's when they basically created this whole concept of value being attached to something that is paper or tangible. It was basically like an IOU. If you go back far enough to what money was, it was basically like, I'm good for this.
Hmm.
Right. And
Hmm.
then the bank would basically say, like, this person is good for this. And so I'm going to go trade this note around. And that's me transacting in terms of money. And that's one thing I think is really important for people to grasp is that like money has always been fake, right? Like the concept of money is something that we've collectively created to try to push ourselves towards an outcome, right? Transacting for value. And originally, when it was back to gold, that was something that was tangible. And of course, the concept made sense, but the practicality was not there. And then if you go down the line, we've just been further evolving the concept that was started there. So I think that was an important thing that I wanted to mention. And then the banks obviously created these IOU things where people could go around and transact and trade those IOU things around. And then that's how we get banks. That's how we get the central bank. And that's all I wanted to add, man. So you
That
pick back up.
that would have been a much better place to start.
No, you're good, man. You're good. I think it makes sense to have both.
So, uh, so yes, and now, right, going from we have obviously this essentially what we like to look at money as is as a technology, right? It's a technology, it's a mode of communication of value, and
Yes, that's a
so
great way to put it.
now we're at the point to where okay, we're gonna use gold. Okay, now we're gonna use these currencies that represent gold that is deposited in a bank vault. Okay, and in the United States specifically, what happened is in around 1933 we had the end of the domestic gold standard. So once again, people would imagine you as a citizen, you have gold, you're going to deposit that at a bank and you're going to get notes back for that gold. Imagine, right? And so, um, on a national level in the United States, that concept was ended on a national level, right? Because also
Mhm,
the central bank has a vault, right, with gold. And so the currency that they were issuing, right, is supposed to be backed by the gold that was in the vaults of the central banks or the country itself, right?
totally.
So in 1933, FDR ended the domestic gold standard, prohibiting the private ownership of monetary gold and stopped redeeming dollars for gold inside the United States. Okay, so now the dollars of the US are not necessarily backed by gold for the citizens inside the country, but
Mhm,
on a national, or excuse me, on an international level, there was still a gold standard in place where the value of gold was pegged to around like $35 an ounce, I think was the number.
okay.
So moving forward, we get to 1971, and there's a whole story behind this around how essentially other governments had deposited gold in the United States. I think France was the one that really was kind of like pressing the US about this. They were like, hey, we want our gold back because you guys are doing some funny business with your currency. And the US was like, well, no. How about no? And a lot of people mark this as technically a default uh, that happened in the United States, where essentially we've said, hey, actually, no, you can't get your gold back from us in exchange for the dollars that you hold. And so instead, we're just going to end the whole gold standard. We're just going to change the name of the game right now. and that was President Nixon in 71. And so he suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold to stop a run on gold reserves because once France did it, everyone else is going to do it as well. And then a little bit later, we had in 1976 what was called the Jamaica Accord. I actually didn't know that this is what it was called. I just found this as I was doing some research. Um, and this was when it was actually made official in international law that we would end this global gold standard. And so this was done alongside with the IMF. And essentially, countries came together and said, all right, we're going to kind of just have this floating currency rate system that is not backed by any particular commodity and no other good, and rather just based upon the full faith and credit of whatever government is actually issuing that currency.
That is a crazy concept. And it's what I find the most fascinating is whether by design or not, not many people understood this concept. And equally, how easy it is to make something a norm, right? Like this is something that people don't even ask where money comes from or why money has value. They just, and I guess that's because they're so busy with their daily lives and trying to survive that they don't have the opportunity to stop and think about this stuff, which is why we created the show in the first place. But that is a wild concept where basically they're just saying this has value because we say it does, and you're going to have to go along with that.
Yeah, man, it's tough. Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this a lot, where it's just like, a couple guys came into a room, made some decisions, and now we have a system that doesn't work for everyone.
Totally.
So
So then
I think
it go.
I think from there, like we could move into a little bit of like why even gold can be helpful as money and why a fiat currency is an issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And fiat is, did we explain what fiat means? 'Cause that's a word that gets thrown around a lot in finance that people don't know.
Yeah. So the word fiat in this situation, it's actually a Latin word. It means, I believe, let it be so. It's kind of like the meaning in
No
Latin.
way.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, so do you look it up real quick?
I'm trying to find fiat meaning Latin. Uh, all right. In Latin, yeah, let it be done or it shall be. That's crazy.
Yeah. So
That is wild.
so it comes down to the fact that it means that there's no particular reason or backing for these currencies. They don't necessarily stand for anything other than that someone said it is money, and it
It is
is.
because it is. The
Yeah,
concept is. That's insane.
exactly. So um, the difference between a currency that's backed by nothing and gold is that gold kind of, if you use gold as your currency, it has a sort of anything that's a physical good has a sort of like self-regulating mechanism to it. Because essentially how this works, right, is you have people, if you're going to use gold as money, well, you have to go and get gold, right? So there's energy and resources that have to go into actually getting the gold out of the ground. And therefore, I need to be incentivized to do that. And so what happens is you have a currency that's backed by gold. Okay, there's a certain price, right, of that actual currency that the price of gold in that currency that's going to make me want to go and dig it out, right?
Mhm.
So
The
if
incentive's there.
exactly. So the price is higher. So I'm going to go dig up the gold. And then once there's more gold, the price of that gold is then going to come back down, right? Supply and demand, simple dynamics there. And then what happens again is it gets to the place to where the value of the gold is so low, right? That, wow, I'm losing my thoughts at the moment.
You're good.
But it turns into a self-regulating cycle. All right. So
Mhm.
when the price is low enough, when the price is high, I'm going to dig it up. But when the price is too low, I'm going to stop. And then eventually, like things regulate and regulate and
They level
regulate
out.
until it levels back out again, is what it comes down to.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. It creates a natural flow of value within an economy because when it's back to a scarce resource that also has effort attached to it, like you said, you can only get so much in the first place. And if everyone wants it, then you'll try to get more. But then when no one wants it, you'll stop. And so there's ebbs and flows. It creates a natural market, right? Which we're all very much accustomed for, where things go up and then things go down naturally based on supply and demand. That dictates price. Like that concept, I think, makes a ton of sense to people. And shiny metal that has a lot of utility in many different ways with gold. Like that whole concept to me makes sense. When they switched over to this system, it makes a lot less sense because there's nothing there that's naturally regulating the system when they're letting it be done by this money that they've created out of thin air.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm gonna tap onto that, but I wanted to go back real quick because I didn't finish my
Yeah,
thought
do your
properly.
thing. You're good, good.
um, all right. So what happens is the economy starts to grow again, right? So you get to the point to where there's a higher demand for that gold because there's more essentially value being created in the system in general. And that's why you end up needing more gold again. And that's why the price and the demand of the gold goes back up. Just wanted to finish
Got it.
that off.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, so from there we're lost the gold standard, and with that, we're going into this world where technically there's two issues. One being that we have a centralized system where a government can issue debt in its own currency, and the thing about that,
That's so
it,
crazy. That's
it's
sorry.
wild.
That's insane.
It's wild. It's like, hey man, I'm not even gonna go there. It's too graphic. But like imagine your essence, right? You're just gonna say, hey man, like lend me money, like I'll be me. Anyways, so you get to the point to where we get to where in the, I think it was like the 80s or so, someone actually termed this concept called modern monetary theory. Where, and I say someone, and I feel like there's a popular economist that came up with this. um, but modern monetary theory is essentially that concept that a government can actually issue debt in its own currency. And if that's the case, then there's no limit to which they can continue to print currency other than the constraint to which that's going to end up in inflation, right?
Mm,
Which could then lead to social unrest and then issues of that nature. So that's the only real limit on how much money can come into circulation. And the problem with money coming into circulation is that the more of the money that there is, with nothing backing it, by the way, the less the value of that currency has. And that leads to the issues that we actually have for individual people.
yes. And so I just looked up who created that. It looked like it was made by a few different people. The most prevalent name that's popping up is Warren Mosler.
Okay.
And then L. Randall Ray, Stephanie Kelton, and Bill Mitchell. So those are the names that were attached to the concept of modern monetary theory. But there's so many issues that come off of that concept being in practice. And that's also why when you said in the beginning about how over 50% of the value in the global economy is from America, well, when money is made up, so too can value be made up. And when the primary issuer of this, because I say so, money is in America, like that just kind of makes sense that a lot of the value would be accrued in America. And then that's probably a natural place because you brought us to where we are now, how the system's in place. It actually might be worthwhile explaining what happened yesterday where they decided to
Mm.
cut the federal interest rate. Can you explain? Because this is attached to the modern monetary theory, correct?
In some ways, yeah. I mean, what happened yesterday was the Federal Reserve in the United States actually cut interest rates by 25 basis points. And so this comes after about a year of holding rates steady
Mhm.
in the United States. So when we get a cut in the interest rate, essentially it allows for looser credit conditions, meaning that banks can lend out more money. And in their lending of money, in the United States, something that a lot of people didn't hear about, but back in 2020 in the United States, we actually put the reserve ratio down to zero. So there actually is no reserve ratio anymore in the United States. And all of the money that banks are printing is technically based upon like very arbitrary, like supervisory kind of levels that we don't necessarily know a whole lot about. I think there's things like the supplementary leverage ratio, which is something I don't know a whole lot about, but it your deposits in the bank don't actually lead directly to lending activity. It just happens because the banks are able to because of these different rates and other supervisory things that are being done by federal agencies and also the Federal Reserve in the United States.
So wait, to clarify for myself and people watching this. So not only is money not backed to gold anymore, now after 2020, it's not even backed to bills that have been printed?
Right. Well, yeah. So you have like the money that the government creates through essentially through when they're raising money from people, right? When they raise
Okay.
money through bonds and stuff like that, that's
Yeah.
like government money creation essentially. But then there's also credit creation through banks. And that's actually the majority of money that's in existence today. I think
Okay.
it's something like 60% again of all money in existence in the United States comes from lending activities, which is also money that's printed from thin air. And it used to be that, okay, let's say we had a 10% reserve ratio. That meant that, for every dollar that you put in the bank can essentially lend out nine more dollars that they just
Got
created
it.
out of thin air. But now
Mm.
technically that $1 doesn't mean anything. It's just they can, there are constraints to what the private bank can do, but it's not based upon your deposits, is what it comes down to.
And again, they're made up by a very small selection of people that dictate rules that are naturally self-serving. One thing that's inherently flawed with any system that's designed by humans is that humans are inherently selfish to some degree. Like there's no I don't think a truly altruistic human being can exist unless our very DNA gets changed. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. So these systems just inherently create bias and create problems. And we're at a point now in capitalism where it's impacting a ton of people. Like people are very affected by this, and it only makes sense. This is a natural progression where when you run a system like this, it can only really end up like this because eventually the people with more money have more leverage. And so if they understand the system, which clearly they do, that money is infinitely printable and a fake concept, they want to put their money into something that can grow to keep up with the increased supply of money because like anything, right? We talked about supply and demand for gold. When there's nothing naturally regulating the supply and the demand of the market, the more money that gets issued into the system, no money is going away from the system. So naturally, the buying power of the dollars that already exist are worth less and less the more money that's in the system. So as soon as there is money printed, when it's someone who is struggling to get by, their life doesn't really get impacted in any serious way. The money usually flows up to people who already have leverage and already have assets. Think like businesses, stocks, real estate, etc. And those people just rush to buy more assets because they understand there's no point in holding the dollar. Because let's say you kept it in the bank and you get an interest rate that's from the whatever the federal interest rate is, that's not going to be able to keep up with the impacts in the buying power of a dollar, which is why the rich people only have assets. And so when it creates the system where yeah, there's more money in the system, but it flows to people who are already rich, and then they sprint to put it into assets. The asset prices get too high where you and me can't even go buy a single asset to start playing the game because the price has been artificially pushed so high, which is why a lot of people don't get this concept is like we're experiencing record high in the S&P 500 and no one has like we've never felt more poor. And yet the S&P 500 is seeing record highs.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick
Yes.
because can I share my screen? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I think you can. Give it a go.
Let's try it. Because essentially there is also this concept of M2, M3, and how much money is actually in circulation, right?
Okay.
So, this is like in my favorites tab, by the way. I just looked it up that fast. But what we're the other side of what you're saying is that there's also this inflation of the actual money supply itself. And so when we actually look at the S&P 500, for example, versus the amount of money that's also been coming into circulation over time, we actually haven't even reached the same levels that we were at in 2001 or so when we had that big boom. So this chart is essentially representing the S&P 500 versus M3. Once again, M3 being the broadest measure of money, and the fact that the supply of money has been going up so fast versus the S&P 500 has meant that since 2001, we haven't actually posted new gains in essentially the actual monetary value of the S&P 500. So I just wanted to kind of quickly demonstrate that.
So what does that mean more practically?
Mhm. So for every unit of the S&P 500 that you've bought in the past 2 decades, um, it hasn't necessarily grown faster than inflation of the money supply.
Got it. Okay.
So in terms of, now this isn't versus CPI, right? The price of goods in particular, but the
Yes.
actual supply of money, which can turn into CPI inflation.
Okay.
Did that
Makes
make
sense.
sense?
Yeah, that did help, at least for me. If anyone didn't understand that concept in the comments, please ask it, and hopefully someone who's better equipped to answer the question, either they do it or Keith can reply after, and we can get you the information that you want and need. But that makes a little more sense. But it does create a crazy game where so much of what we see today as normal in terms of say like Wall Street investment and all of these different investment products that exist, they're only really possible because we started this kind of system, right? Like, and if you think about how rich Wall Street has become since this changeover of financial structures, like it's crazy to think about how normal that is, and how risky the games are that they're playing when as we saw in the what was the crash of '08? Was that what it was?
When what happened?
When the banks, like the Big Short, what year was
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Was that
yeah. Oh
2008?
0809. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so if you haven't seen that movie, anybody, I strongly recommend going to watch The Big Short, because there's so many things that if you don't start asking questions about finances, which is one of the biggest goals of this show, is just to start asking the questions, because the answers are always kind of shocking, in my opinion. You're like, how did that become a thing? And it's not how it's presented when you learn about it on a surface level, and within investing in the first place. Like, it's crazy how risk tolerant everyone has become, because it all kind of feels like it's fake, and there you can't really lose. Do you know what I mean? Like it feels like everyone's just taking higher and higher leverage, which is just more and more risk, because they just feel like they can. And when the banks collapsed, or when there was the collapse in '08, do you know much about that whole situation in terms of how they got bailed out? No?
Not a whole lot. No.
Okay. We
There were
should do an episode
government
on that in the
programs.
future.
Yeah, yeah. That's for sure. For sure.
So,
Um,
yeah, so let's get back to people watching this, right? So, if you're in the situation now where you can better understand why the buying power of your dollar is going to continue to go down, but while that's happening, the cost of assets continues to go up and up and up, meaning you can't get in and buy assets. It puts you in a really difficult situation. And in this situation in an economy, the gap between rich and poor just becomes further and further dramatic. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these social issues that we're seeing happening throughout the world, is because we're at the point where that's happening, right? Where people have never been, in our lifetime, I don't remember anyone being this struggling for money. And then also with the advent of social media, that's just a lot louder than ever too. So I think it's combining forces, but it does leave people in a shitty situation where the wages are not going up with the rate of inflation. It's not going up with the rate of assets. So you basically feel like you're on this hamster wheel for literally ever, and you work and you work and you work and you don't get ahead at all.
right. Right. Yeah. And you're seeing it, and I think you make an interesting point about the social media side too, because it's like, even if things were always like that, well, now it's being amplified in these places because they're seeing that it's an issue, right?
Yeah, perception
Um,
becomes reality, right? If we didn't even know it's happening, I think about this all the time, Keith, where if you go back to the creation of media, the people who owned the media essentially created reality, because I really think about this deeply. Like, if you go back to the olden days, no one really knew how other people lived unless they saw it with their own eyes. But when everything is now available on your screen, normalcy gets created by what you see the most frequently. And so that issue is that's why our world has become increasingly more messed up, because algorithms reward our innate desires for the fear of loss, or the fear of missing out, or the avoidance of pain. And so those are the strongest underlying motivators of human beings. And so that stuff just gets spewed everywhere. So, yes, I think objectively it would have been in a bad situation anyways, but now that content also does really well. So, ironically, paradoxically, it rewards the people who talk about how bad it is the most, which only further uh, exaggerates the problem.
100%, man. Yeah. And, you can have protests organized nowadays, within minutes on a social media, a story post, right? Um,
Yes.
so,
Because people don't have anything to attach to, man. Like, the thing is, when we're at this point, people feel, and I can speak to this personally, because I have friends that are like incredibly affluent, and I have friends that are struggling and they've just fully given up. And I understand both sides. And I think a lot of people that have in the given up camp, or feel like there's no point, that's the whole thing. They just think there's no point. And so if they're collectively all in this, they get there's social proof everywhere. When they go on social media, they're like, "See, everyone is screwed up. Like, everyone's poor. So this must be a systemic issue. So we need someone to point at." And they're not incorrect in that. A lot of people have been very selfish, and the systems were built in a way that weren't forward thinking enough, or maybe they were perfectly designed for what the people wanted. I have no idea. I wasn't there, but now it's like, I get where the people are, where they're like, "What's the point of this? I could work so hard and I don't get ahead." But they don't get ahead because they don't ask the questions that we're talking about here, and they don't work in a way that you need to, that you don't get taught how to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting you say, maybe it was perfectly designed this way. In the United States, when we look at our educational system, it starts to get to the point to where it must be designed that way. And because you also see how much pushback people get when they try to come in and offer the things that people really want to know. And how, those people that are doing those things, they stay pretty small. Usually it's usually not like some like global campaign to actually change the educational system so that we teach financial literacy in schools properly and stuff like that. So, I'm not super deep in the game, and I haven't done my part to really push that here in the US. But I think that's also another part of it is like taking ownership of what we can.
Mm.
And sometimes taking ownership of things that most people just wouldn't. I mean,
I I think that's also speaks to its potentially being perfectly designed because now it's self-governed. Where, like, let's say you came in and you actively tried to push financial literacy. If people hate finance so much, which I see all the time, whenever I try to talk about finance, I used to be in like high school, college talking about finance, and people would literally tell me to like stop being so lame and like, why are we talking about this? Like, have fun. And I'm like, bro, if we're all poor, we ain't having fun. Like, let's figure this shit out. And I'm like, this is deeply rooted in people's psyche where it had to come from somewhere where, oh, I don't know money. I don't deal with money. That's what other people do. I don't. And that I am, that belief statement is incredibly powerful and something that's clearly deeply ingrained in people's psyche. And I can't think that that's by accident. You have to feel like that's deliberate. So then there's that. And then also, people are so deeply rooted into their problems now because they can find them and access them everywhere. And most people have finance problems, which you get reminded of every time you leave the door when you try to buy things. But you also get reminded every time you look at your phone because people are talking about their money problems too. So it just spirals and you get very deep in this where the problem seems so large that they don't believe that education could possibly solve their problem. They're like, why would I waste my time? I can just turn my brain off and go into this. There's no way what you have to say is going to solve my problem. And that's why people like you could say that we could go and try to push this, but no one would give a shit. Like they'd be like, no, I don't care. You're full of it. You're making this up. You're trying to scam me. Like that happens all the time.
yeah. Oh man, there's so much to touch on with that. You know, coming back to like because people might not also have a lot of time, and I think that's a big part of it. And like that's the trap. It's like you get
Very true.
stuck working something that's going to work you more than you possibly could, and then even if you have a little bit of time to like study or learn, you're gassed. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like you don't have any energy to actually do anything about the information that you're taking in, and I think that's a very common trap.
That's super common, and it's also you feel like there's not enough time to make any impact, but I do think that's also a big trap because if you look at your screen time, I guarantee you have way more than you think that you do, and you're putting it towards the wrong places, right? So if you're on your break, you're watching TikTok, all short form content is garbage. Like I promise you, anything that you're going to consume on TikTok is not worth your time. I've never met someone who's really successful who spends a lot of time on short form content. Never. Because inherently, the values and the things you need to learn can't be taught in a 1 minute crackhead edit. It just can't. And so, and then even if it is gold, it's amidst a sea of shit, right? Because you might
Right.
get this one good video that really is impactful, but 2 minutes later, you forgot you watched it in the first place, defeating the entire purpose. So I think people need to be a lot more selective with where they give their time and attention and only watch long form content, please, people. Like if you're struggling with your life, I know it sounds ironic where you're like, I don't have a lot of time, so I need to watch short form content. That is a trap.
Right.
You are better off chipping away at like 5 minutes of the time at something long term that's actually substantial and long form content than watching garbage on TikTok, man. But it's so addictive. It's so good, man. One thing I will say on that point, I know I'm ranting here, but whenever you watch TikTok, it doesn't feel messed up, right? Because it's for you. But when you listen to someone else watch TikTok, you instantly are like, this cannot be good for my brain. Because it's just like you only really spot that when it's not you fully immersed in it.
Wow.
Like when my girlfriend watches it, I'm like, yo, that shit's straight poison. Like there's no world this is good for me at all. So I think that you made a great point, and I'm really glad that you brought that up. That you if you're watching this, because you click this, you're definitely pressed for time, but that time still has value. And the compounding nature, which we should talk about compounding in another episode, like the fact that you can stack upon your education over time is so valuable. So safeguard that time and believe that it can change you. Because like both you and I didn't come from like a ton of means. Like my parents were comfortable, but they didn't understand money. They just had decent jobs, right? All this stuff that I know about, it's purely self-taught. I went to school, but I didn't learn any of this in university. It was purely from content that was available for free. But you got to go to the right places to think that there is value in the free content.
100%. And it kind of makes me want to say, like, if you're young and you're watching this, like, really listen to what Ben is saying right here, because you have an opportunity in a little bit of a window to where you're
Hmm.
not, like, hopefully not stuck in that work trap yet. And when you take that time to really dig deep on topics that you care about, that you think are important, you will put yourself in a much better position to win over time, and also, start doing stuff as well. I think, we've jumped ahead a little bit, but, we're not just here to just talk about how the system is broken today. Like, we want to also
Yes.
talk about ways to at least
Solve your
make,
problem.
yeah, like make your life better as we know
Totally.
it's messed up. So
Yeah, yeah. So the whole reason is this: I don't ever want the show to be doomsday, but I think you first have to speak to the reality of the situation, which we've tried to do, to say, like, okay, here's how we got here. Now we're gonna try to give you a roadmap out of that situation because it is always possible. It's just never going to be obvious or easy. It might actually sometimes be obvious once you've heard it once, but you have to match that with belief that it can be that simple. So let's try to give people a way out. So let's like use a hypothetical scenario. I'll use people that like the one that's so common where let's use someone who does have a job, but they've got bills, they've got finances, they've got things that they need to pay for on a consistent basis. Let's say they only have a few hours of time per week and they really don't like their job, but they can't quit. How do you even begin to get out of that situation?
I think the first thing, as we were kind of going into, is definitely trying to find a specific topic to learn about. And going straight to, like, so here's how I look at, like, my content sphere. There's stuff that's entertaining, there's stuff that's educational but not actionable, and then there's stuff that's educational and actionable. I think in that situation, you want to eliminate the purely entertainment type of content. Like, you can't even have it be a part of your life, and that includes music to a certain extent. I'm a huge
Mm,
music person, but I've realized that if I spend a whole lot of time listening to music, especially music that's bad for your mind, right,
mhm.
that is time being spent on something that's not necessarily helping you get out of that situation. Um, Even music in a way is like, um, it's like TikToky. It's also like, explicit content, because it's like it puts you in the state of, like, dreaming. In rap specifically is really what I'm talking. I'm talking to those people that are, like, listening, like Gunna and Thug,
Okay.
and, like, you know what I mean? Because I listen
Mhm.
to it too. Don't get me wrong, but,
Yeah.
like, the state that it puts you in is in the state of, like, imagining living this life that they're living, right? But it's not necessarily what it is at the moment. And it's okay to dream. It's okay you need to visualize. Don't get me wrong. But to get stuck in that and to get hooked on that, which is what that music is kind of designed to do, right? It's hooking you into just that dream state. You also have to come back down and say, okay, what are the things that I can actually be doing? So I've got my educational content that's more high level. I think it's okay to start there so that you can get an idea of the direction that you want to move in. But then you want to very rapidly move yourself into, like, okay, what do I actually do? And find your favorite creators. I keep running lists of all of my favorite creators in different spaces so that I
Mm.
know when it's like, okay, I need to lock in on this today. Let me go and see what this person is posting about and go deep down those rabbit holes. And my goal, right, is to find the key people that are putting as much value into the shortest period of time as possible. And I'm going deep on those people. So from there, hopefully you're getting actionable insights that you can start acting on and just start probing and putting stuff out into the world. My game is content, right? So that's the thing that I would suggest for a lot of people, is to start either writing or using your face to some extent. I'm just going to be honest. Like, I truly believe that the world that we're moving into is not going to have a whole lot of opportunities for people who are not using their face in order to generate, in their likeness, that is, to generate income. Like I really think that we're moving in a world where at least that's going to be the biggest moat for the individual person is your personal brand and your personality.
Completely. The the issue is how big of a change this is. I always recommend simplifying it and putting it into concepts that you can already understand. So, like, let's say you're someone who's really overweight and you want to lose weight. If you just try to go cold turkey into, I'm going to work out every day and I'm going to eat perfectly, the chances of that happening are slim to none. So, I think know yourself and also set yourself up for success, not failure. And a lot of people that I know that are in these bad situations, the issue is that they develop vices, right? Where they're like, oh, I listen to TikTok because it's the only thing that makes me feel good. It's a lot like with the person who's really overweight, they eat the food because it makes them feel good. But that is the trap where you'll never get out of there unless you make some small changes to see what feeling better feels like. A lot of people are incredibly unhealthy and they say they feel fine because they don't remember what it feels like to feel good. And when it comes to finances, there are very few people who have ever gotten to the point of feeling empowered by money. They're afraid by money, right? So you first need to be around things that can push you in the right direction. So the first thing that I would do is, I love how Keith said that, is the perfect first step is just shifting your content away from entertainment towards just general education. Like, is this better for me? It's a fantastic place to start because I could say, go listen to this person's content who I know is good, but until you've consumed enough of enough, you don't know the difference between bullshit and good advice. So you first have to develop that, and that will come over time. Then once you've done that, you need to shrink the time between knowledge being acquired and application, just like you said. And the book that I recommend everyone reading is this right here. So it's called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. He is a philosopher and a venture capitalist, a very interesting blend of dynamics and thought processes that honestly is a cheat code for life. I read this book very shortly after it came out. I was also a big follower of his on Twitter. And Naval is one of the most wise person who's can best equip you with how to deal with the shitty situation that we're in that we've talked about throughout this episode. And the concepts that he goes to is a word that I really want. If anything sticks throughout this whole episode, this is what I hope does. The concept of leverage. Because all of the things we talked about, how asset prices go up, and if you're holding something of value, that gives you more leverage in the marketplace, which means that you don't have to do things that you don't want to do because you can get returns from things that you've already done before. Until you develop leverage in a capitalistic economy, you will forever be poor. I only at this point in my life, like I can see that even my friends, my family friends who are like middle class, they're still poor. Like it's literally just rich and poor at this point. And so to get to the rich, you need to create more and more leverage for yourself. And in this book, he does a fantastic job explaining the different kinds of capitalistic leverage that you can create. The first one, I'll go through the four quickly, and then please go read this. If I can give you anything, please go read this. But the concepts of the different kinds of leverage, I believe there's only three that he mentioned. But the first one, I'm not going to say them in order, is human capital. So basically, people working for you. That's a form of leverage because you can get more output or more, you can get more from the cost that you're paying them because you've built the system where that human capital is able to be a higher leverage activity.
And on top of that, right? Like
Okay.
you've only got 24 hours in a day. Whereas if you
Yes.
have multiple people that are working towards the same goal, you have
Yep.
now 48, 72. You've multiplied your hours in a day.
100%. Yes. Thank you for chipping in there. And whenever you have something like that, just shut me up and chip in because that was really good. So with that, so you can't have that right now because you don't have the money. So like let's not even think about that right now, but let's remember that it's there. The next one is money is leverage, right? Because you can put it into things, you can make it work for you in terms of investments, you can put it into real estate, stocks, whatever. And as you know, those things go up. And even some of them can be cash flowing assets, like say like a business, right? Where you buy it and then it creates money for you every single month. So too with a cash flowing property. That's another form of leverage, but you need money to get there. So I don't even want you to worry about that. The next thing that that he talks about is code. Why is software and code such a high impact form of leverage? Is because you build it once and it runs forever. You may have to maintain it, but the input output equation gets changed dramatically. Almost everyone watching this is in a point in time with their life where they trade time for money. Until you get out of that equation, you can never possibly become rich because you'll never be compensated fairly when you're trading time for money. It just won't ever happen because you don't have leverage. And unfortunately, the people with leverage know that. So they also know that they don't have to pay you crazy amounts of money because you need the job. And so until you build the leverage, you can't get out of it. So code is another fantastic one. Learning to code used to be way harder than it is now. There are now AI tools out there that can code things for you. You can learn how to code using them. So code is another fantastic one. The last one that I'm going to get to is what Keith, you already said, media. Why is media such a high leverage activity? Because we film this podcast right now. It can then live on the internet working for us day and night, 24/7, and we don't have to do any additional work. That's the epitome of leverage. And this shit is accessible for free.
And
So go
and
for it.
and like this is the part. As this came up last night, I was on a live. Like Myron Golden, he's kind of this like big business coach out there. He really opened my eyes up to this. He said, when I'm looking at my YouTube stats, the one that I'm looking at the most is the watch hours.
Mm.
Because the thing is that, right, you're creating this one piece of content one time, and people are watching that one piece of content and all of the other content, by the way, that you put out for all this time that you've been doing it. You're getting hours, and they're spending hours and hours and hours and hours of their time with you, right, from content that you made one time. So the hours in, right, is multiplied, right? The hours out is multiplied when you're putting out content, because people can come in and review it over and over again, right? I've had people that say, dude, I watch this video every single day until I get it. It's like, yo, that's a very big benefit. And when you're building a business, this is the other big thing is like, there's been some research that was done that says like people need to spend around 7 hours or something with you to be ready to transact, right? So you've made one video, or let's say 10 videos one time, and now you're done. And now people are coming in and they're watching all of your videos. There's people that say, dude, I found your channel and I watched every single one of your
Everything.
videos.
Yeah, I used to get that all the time.
And it's like, okay, so now this person has sat down and one day consumed all of my content that it took me a month or so to put together. And now they're ready to transact immediately, right? Just like that after one day. So the leverage aspect of content, as well as that you're making content one time, is being viewed by millions of people, right? In over, days and hours and weeks of time.
It's more than a free employee. It's an employee that pays you. Like that was the concept that really sold me on it when I've tried to always explain to other people, because I've been creating YouTube content for 9 years at this point. And so when I was getting roasted by everyone for making YouTube content and carrying around my camera, I was just thinking, what do you get paid per hour? Like that's all you're ever going to get for that hour that you gave away. Whereas I may be the idiot with the camera in my hand right now filming this video, but this video could theoretically pay me until the day that I die. Right? Like that kind of leverage is just not accessible elsewhere. And obviously, Keith and I are living, breathing examples of this in action. But a lot of people can't get started because they don't see someone in their immediate circle who does this. So I also want to try to provide people a roadmap for, okay, they now understand the different concepts of leverage. Now let's get practical. So, because Keith and I can both say, go create content, right? But it doesn't, you to make money, you need to exchange value, right? Because you need to be giving something that is enough value that you can actually get the return that you want in terms of their attention, and then the economic influence and the money that comes from that, right? So let's use Keith's channel as an example. He's spending time learning these concepts and these financial concepts, et cetera, that he wants to teach to people that would take them a lot more time to figure out and decipher themselves. So he's giving his time once to create this synchronized version of, or succinct version of what you need. And he's packaging it for you in a way that is a lot more optimal to consume than what he just did. He did a bunch of boring shit to make this easy for you. In content, you want to do one of two things to make money. You want to push people either towards pleasure or away from pain. So think about in your life, where can I provide value to people through content, doing one of those two things? Rich, like, and people are more motivated by like the fear of loss or the fear of pain. So transformations are a very impactful thing. But even the acquisition of pleasure is an avenue too, right? Like think comedy, think like therapy, right? Other different ways to improve people's lives. But when you think to that principle of, okay, I'm going to create content because that's high leverage, but you take it to the next level when you actually have some strategy behind it and think, I'm going to make this valuable by solving people's problems or improving their life.
Love it, man. Um, so I'm taking notes, by the way, for anyone watching. And so on the human, I want to go back to the human capital thing real quick too,
Yeah.
because it's a common thing to say, oh, you need money to have human capital work for you. But I actually would challenge that because there's two aspects of it. There's one, there's your network alone, right? The people that you're close with, that you know that they have talents and skills that maybe you can either leverage by creating something on the back of what they're doing, or you can actually create something and organize something for them to actually come in and also contribute value to as well.
Hmm.
So the way that I've kind of typed down some notes on that one as well is like, the way I look at that is like, there's organization and influence can actually allow you also to use human capital without having any money. Like,
Mm.
all of this started for me 3 months ago. I had no money. I had no nothing, right? All I had was an idea. And what has happened here is technically we did use content, right? We started to try to solve people's problems and we got some leverage through that. But what that created was organization in the form of a channel and influence. And from that point forward, people were begging me to work with me to solve my problems now, right? And to create opportunities for me. So I'm using myself as an example in that situation, but even a year ago, I would have said the same thing. I would have said,
Totally.
actually, you can go hire salespeople who can work for you on a commission. So if you organize something tight enough that you can convince these people and influence them to come and work with you, then you can
Hmm.
absolutely get human capital without having any money. So don't let that be a limiting factor on the human capital side either. I just wanted to tap on that.
That's so good because creativity is the ultimate equalizer. Nothing is impossible unless you believe that it is so. I say this one quote all the time that you're always right. Whether you believe something is the way that it is or you don't, you're always going to be right because you're going to seek out things that confirm your reality or your perception of reality. That's just what we do as human beings. So when you realize that, you can train your brain through osmosis of just being around the right things or deliberate action and intentional thought and then belief statements, etc., to change how you think and see the world. But you're always going to be right. And so if you're around a sphere of influence that you know is not constructive to who you want to become, that also has to change. Like, I say this all the time where when people complain about their life, I ask them, are you around people that you would hang out with if you were your best self, right? Or if you were in the situation that you wanted to be? And they almost always say no. And then the next thing is, okay, well, are you being your best self to then want to be around the people that you actually want to be around? And usually it's pretty obvious that people aren't doing the things that they need. It's usually pretty obvious that they have the situation that they do because what they're doing, right? Like you reap what you sow. And one point that I wrote down as you were given that awesome nugget there was leverage stacks and compounds again, right? Where Keith, you built this influence that you had that people know they can look at that and be like, that's valuable. And if you had just been cold outreaching people with a concept that you are trying to sell, they would have been like, get out of here, bro. You're wasting my time. But when you organized and you delivered the influence that came from your channel, that changes every equation. And then you stack leverage on top of each other. And that's how these people who are rich completely get out of worrying about money ever because they're making money in ways they forgot. Like they don't even remember all the ways they're making money.
So real, man. Yeah, because then you get people that, and my favorite is the human capital, because what happens is those people start to build their own organization and their own influence,
Yes.
right? On top of that, and that's that leverage on the leverage that I feel like you're talking about in that human capital side. Is like now people are bringing me ideas, they're bringing me people that I should be working with, and those people are also willing to just like contribute to the team.
Yes,
So
completely.
yeah, man.
It's cheat code. My business partner Nick Singh, he has this quote that I've taken from him, so I'll give him credit. Where he said, "The most valuable resource is not time or money; it's relationships, because the right relationship can change you all the time in your life and all the money you'd ever earn." Right? Because think about how often one relationship can get you the job that was impossible to get, or all these rules, because every rule that you see is made up. So they only exist if you allow them to exist. Obviously, people run with things and they take that way to like a hyperbolic level. But like, I know people are like, oh, I should just run around and do crazy shit. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, there's a reason why someone always gets the benefit. It's because they believe that the rules didn't have to be followed the exact way that they were written, or they got creative and they found a way and they got to a solution, which is really important. Creativity is huge, but it's hard to be creative when you're in a very negative space. So make these little changes that we're talking about. day over day. Like even this show is objectively going to be better than what anything you could consume on TikTok. Like obviously I'm incredibly biased here, but like the whole point of making this show is because I don't feel like information is worth having if you don't share it. And so that's what we're always going to try to do here. And yeah, I think to be honest, I think we gave them a pretty decent roadmap. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add in terms of getting out of the shitty situation?
No, I think we broke down some really cool stuff. That tip about Naval Ravikant is fantastic. I mean, he's definitely someone to follow for both general education and actionable ideas. He is a very unique individual that you can't find. That right there is saving you a ton of time. Right, him
Yes.
telling you to go read that book and follow Naval Ravikant, that saves you a whole lot of time. You're not going to find anyone who thinks or talk like that.
No, he's an anomaly in today's world, especially because everyone's trying to do more and more and more. He's trying to think more and do less. And of course, you can only get to that point once you have first done all the things. So that's a fortunate position that he's in. But while you're doing constant motion, which is what you should start with if you're new, when you combine that progress, that forward progress with a bit of direction, you can get to where you want to go so much faster and really, really build leverage a lot faster. So that's the thing. We talked about human capital, financial capital. We said code, and then media, which is media you can do for free. If you got a phone in your hand, or if you're watching this, you have a way to capture and create media, either written or video. So for that, what else do we have next here, man? Do you want to respond to some of the comments that we got last week, or do you want to, or Tuesday? What do you want to do?
We can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, we had some comments specifically about like Ripple and XRP. I'll try to pull it up, or if you have it, I can.
I can pull them up. It'll be funny to read them.
Yeah,
So yeah, so last episode, if it's the first one that you've ever watched, we talked about XRP, and the whole point of it was to be an introduction to it. We weren't claiming to know it inside and out. And Keith was also, I would say, you were pretty intentional about saying that you were simplifying things or that you were getting things not 100% accurate, but people still lost it. So we got some not so nice comments. Let's go through and see some of them, and then see if you want to respond to them. Is there any one in particular that jumped out? Because I have them all in front of me now.
yeah. I mean, there was the main thing was about the market cap situation. So
Yes, yes, great call.
yeah, um,
Do you want me to read? There was like three about that market cap.
yeah, which I thought was so fascinating. Okay, so please do some research on why market cap and crypto is not the same as equities. Please understand how the market cap multiplier and the order book works. So we specifically went over the market cap multiplier. But to address the idea of there being a difference in the market cap for crypto, 100%, right? I got caught up in my thoughts and I was explaining market cap so that I could get to that point, but I didn't. I didn't do that. So in crypto, the idea of cryptocurrencies is that at some point, some of these are supposed to actually have utility, right? So it's not supposed to be like a stock where you just buy it and hold it and it goes up and down, but instead the value that's supposed to be derived from it is its use inside of either the network itself or across even other different networks or money systems.
Mhm.
So XRP was the specific example that, well, this is what we were talking about. And someone said, the price equals the total transaction value divided by the float times the velocity. Okay, great. So this idea essentially is that in the XRP ecosystem specifically, you have a token that is supposed to be moving around, right? It's supposed to be being used as on-demand liquidity. And in that, there could be a totally different valuation for this asset in terms of its liquidity and its velocity and how fast it's actually moving. So 100%, that is another way that you can look at the valuation of XRP specifically, and also in other digital assets as well, potentially when it actually has a use case. So we're aware of that. So yeah, just wanted to address that one.
No, that was really well said, and I think that we'll be getting more and more keyboard warriors as time goes on, and that's totally cool. We're cool with that, and what I would hope that if someone's still here, when someone asks a question, or even if we get something wrong, educate, right? And if that's really what you're trying to do, which is like a lot of times haters will say they're coming from a place of, oh, I'm just trying to educate you. It's like, then why are you being such a dick? Like you don't, you can educate and not be condemning me at the exact same time. So yeah, nuance definitely gets lost on the internet, but this show is meant to be an educational resource for us too, right? Like we're in this point where we're trying to learn more than we know right now. And so in future episodes, if you have questions or if you leave a comment that is replyable, we'll be replying to some comments in every episode. We'll reply to the one before. So if you got questions or you have comments, share them down below in this on YouTube, and we will answer some of them on Tuesday when we're back.
Yep. Yep. We appreciate
Sweet,
you
man.
guys being here. So
Yeah, yeah,
keep it
100%. We'll
coming.
keep doing this Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12 p.m. EST. Figure this is a good place to wrap it up, Keith. How do you feel?
I feel great, man. Great,
All right,
great,
man.
great time.
All right, let's do it. We'll see y'all on Tuesday at 12 p.m. Set your reminders and we'll talk it up then. And we'll be talking, I think we're talking about Bitcoin on Tuesday. So it's actually a natural evolution because of all the problems that we discussed. They very naturally feed into why Bitcoin has gained such mass use and popularity. So we'll be talking Bitcoin on Tuesday.
Perfect.
All right. Peace, guys. All right.